Welcome, Kadon. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us today. We appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. Great to be here.
As always, we like to start off by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as acknowledging our ancestors. We want to acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation, as well as the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build, share, and learn and grow together for our collective liberation. So please go ahead and tell us about the origins of your work, a little bit of background and context in your organization.
Great. Yes, so I think like for myself, my work goes all the way back, maybe since my childhood. I've always been drawn to any type of work or activity that helps me help others. I was a Girl Guide, um, part of a few groups in my church, in my community, always finding a way for me to give back and to support others and just to be a champion of other people, especially those who are the most marginalized within our society. Um, and that evolution, it took many different paths over the years. And sorry, just say like moving from I can I just give a little bit about my background? You could edit maybe around it.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. Please do.
So
Background.
I'm born in Grenada in the Caribbean, a small island, small community, but from a large family. I grew up both here and in Grenada. So I spent all of elementary school in Toronto, where I was deeply involved in the Seventh-day Adventist community and also had proximity to LGBTQ and women's rights community through my aunt. So I always had that around me. I grew up with matriarchs, women who were really strong, who were pillars of their community, who value that deeply and see family beyond blood, and always try to create connections and support each other. I come from a line of women who are healers, who are organizers, who are entrepreneurs. So I really tell people that who I am is no surprise because of the ancestral shoulders that I stand on, and also with who I have around me right now. Um, I moved back to Canada when I was 21, and came here. I'd already been, I taught high school for 2 years, so did that work. And a lot of my work teaching in high school centered around literacy and supporting youth who encountered learning challenges within the school system. And what I found during that time is that a lot of those youth were experiencing poverty at the same time and other social challenges. So for me as a teacher, I saw the connections between people's lived experiences and their academic excellence as well. When I moved to Canada, I was really trying to see who am I within this setting. When I moved back to Canada, I mean, who am I within this space? What can I do? How can I serve? And so on. But it wasn't until after I had my son and I really started to think much deeper about that, because now I have someone else who I'm responsible for, and what type of legacy do I want to leave for him, and also want him to experience while I'm alive. I think so much we think about what we will leave behind, but not in terms of what experiences are we sharing with others while we're living. And that's important for us to do as well. So once I had my son, he really made me remember a childhood dream that I had in terms of working in film and television in some capacity. And I pursued a couple workshops, went to talks and so on, say, okay, well, what is this even? I don't have a background in film, television, or in broadcasting. I don't have an academic background in that, but growing up, I was surrounded by that as well. In the early 90s, my aunt and her partner, they were producers and directors. They made a couple independent films. So I had proximity to that too. And it's funny now how I see that as a privilege. Because for me, that was the norm as a child. Um, and once I had once I started to do some of the courses and so on, I remember there was one that I did through a community organization called Manifesto, which I think still exists today. Um, and I did one day did a program, I think it was for like 12 weeks, which was really like an introduction to filmmaking for anybody who's interested. I'm still connected with some of the people who I did that program with years ago. I think that was in 2012. Um, and then I was invited to apply for a program at the Hot Docs Documentary International Film Festival. And that was great because it really just threw me into that world. You know, we all got passes to the festival. We had workshops, networking events that we participated in, and it really made me feel like, yes, this is where I want to be. Um, and from that, I ended up doing an internship, and that turned into a full-time job at a production company here. Did that for a while and realized like, okay, getting closer and getting closer and closer to where I'm supposed to be. And I think that that is something that I want to see more of in terms of people getting the chance try things, to try things before having to decide on what they actually want to do, want to be, that they get a chance to try things out, to excel, to fail, to trip up, to realize, this is not for me, I'm gonna walk this back. I think we need to have more opportunities for people to be apprentices, um, and for people to figure it out. And that's not only for young people, but I think at any stage of your life when you're about to walk through a huge transition. So I think that's me, but we might go into it a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And like you pointed out, like, reflecting, you see the privilege, right, in your background and in the opportunities and experiences you've had. So as we focus on your organization now a little bit more, can you share what your mission and vision is?
Yes. So BIPOC TV and Film was founded back in 2012 by a Chinese Trinidadian writer, here a screenwriter named Natalie Younglai. And she started it back then with the support of another director who's been doing really great work, and he also works as a development executive right now, Shona Foster. That the two of them really spearheaded this mission to see how can we build our own communities since we're locked out of the established network. So how can we build our own, and how can we support each other through mentorship, through knowledge sharing, skill sharing, and so on, to build up. And that was something really special. And what's interested in BIPOC TV and Film was founded in the same year that I decided to start working in the industry, but I didn't become involved in the organization until 5 years later. Um, and what we so that was the founding of it years ago. Over the years, we've been very involved in not only in the community building. We started from a Facebook group, and this has grown into a massive national movement and organization. But we also focus a lot on sectoral change in the industry, like challenging a lot of the existing policies and practices within the industry, advocating for better representation across the board. We're thinking of people from junior positions all the way up to leadership in the industry, that we need to see that representation as well. So that's been the main focus of the organization for several years. In 2020, as with everything, the world dealing with a global pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, the discovery of burial of mass graves of Indigenous people, and also a rise in anti-Asian violence and attacks. There grew like more and more demand of our organization services. And up until 2020, we really just ran it as volunteers. Everybody volunteered their energy, donated whatever they could to keep this going. Um, and it became too much for those who were involved. We know the burnout that exists doing this type of work over several years, and then also having outsiders who do not truly understand what we do, or the pains that our communities experience, who come in with additional demands on us to serve them. is rarely ever to serve us. It's usually under the guise of that. And so we decided to become a not-for-profit organization, and the organization reached out to ask me if I would if I would step in as the inaugural executive director. At the time, I was working at Toronto Metropolitan University. Um, I think I was, maybe like 6 or 7 months into my job there, and I got the call for this one. Um, and I started in this role in January 2021. Since then, the mandate of the organization, it is still, the core of it is community building and sustenance. We need to be able to sustain our community. Our vision is a thriving community of Black, Indigenous, and POC filmmakers, creators, and media entrepreneurs. That is our full goal. We also focus a lot of our work still on the advocacy into the systems change across the industry. We sit on several committees for funders such as the Canada Media Fund, Telefilm Canada. So we support those institutions by bringing the experiences of our community to the table, so that they're able to make informed choices about their next steps. And then our thing is, how can we build capacity within our community as well? And that's through the training and other resources that we provide to the community.
I love that. Like you said, it's so necessary. There has been, a rising demand. It's good to see that, like, you beyond the burnout that's there potentially, that you have taken up that mantle. It's so necessary, and especially in this industry. Sometimes I think it goes unnoticed. There's a lot of talk about that, of course, in Hollywood right now. And so great to see that there's representation here in Canada. So, if we touch on innovation, like how important do you feel that innovation is to the work that you're doing? How are you guys dealing with that?
Oh yeah, I think I could speak broader as the industry. Um, or I'll take that back. One thing I've been saying, I remember I was on a panel late last year, and we were asked to talk about the state of the industry as it is right now. So I started off my response with, here are all of the ways things are falling apart. However, because of who we are, because of what because of what our communities have had to endure over centuries, we are the best built to survive this. We've had to be resilient, we've had to be innovative, we've had to be creative. That's the only way why we're still here today. We've always had to think big and to hold on to our dreams, and those are the things that will keep us going. So because we have that, we've never had a gold spoon in our mouths in this industry. We've had to make it however we can. I think we are best positioned to stay afloat in this new world that's being built. In terms of the wider Canadian industry, what I think we are in an amazing time right now in this industry, where we now see, last year the Canadian Broadcasting Act made significant amendments that got royal assent through the Online Streaming Act. We're seeing more and more conversations about AI and what the impact of AI will be on our industry, how it's going to affect us creatively, financially, legally, across the board. We see the presence of new players in the field, with American streamers taking up space here as well. We've also seen, like, jobs are shifting, jobs are changing, jobs are being lost, but what we have to do in the face of all that is really to dig in our heels in innovation, in thinking, okay, well, not seeing these things mainly as challenges, but seeing them as opportunities for us, like a couple years ago when social media was growing, became a huge thing. And lots of people thought, okay, well, what will that shift? How will that change in terms of how we interact with each other? Um, and we learned, we adapted to these things, with the emergence of new physical, with physical technology. We've learned how to live alongside them and how to use them to our own benefit. Um, so yes, there is an instinct to fear anything new, any change, but I think it will serve us better to embrace it and to see that all of these things are man-made. All of them are. So why can't we as human beings be the ones to manipulate how it's being used? And I'm using manipulate there in a very positive sense. How can we how can we sculpt it and so on in a way that works for our benefit,
For sure. Hmm.
Um, so that's what I see. And yes, there are true dangers with some of the things that are disrupting our sector right now. We saw in past few years, like, yes, virtual production gives us an opportunity to do things on a smaller scale with less money. It allows us to do that, but it also took away a lot of jobs. It also took away a lot of that, but now we see that those things are working side by side, that we're still seeing virtual production hasn't taken over completely. It still exists, but still we're working on big sets as well. Um, so that's where I think that we could really just shift our mindset around it into the seeing it as an opportunity, um, and not so much as something that's coming to wreck our lives. With the Broadcasting Act being amended and modernized here, for the first time, we're seeing languaging that specifically speaks to Black and racialized people within the act. You know, we also saw the CRTC hearings, the CRTC specifically asking people for solutions on how we could better the playing field for people who are from marginalized groups. That this is a specific mandate of the CRTC right now. This is not an add-on. This is not something that we have to go in and fight for. This is one of their main asks. So I think that change is good. It's scary, but it's good.
Always, right? Like you said, it's scary but necessary for sure. So I feel like you've touched on it a bit. I can see your passion, but what inspires you most about your work?
Um, I love storytelling. Absolutely,
You
that's
can
where
see that.
I escaped as a child. I was the child who had like a stack of books. Leave the library, librarian would be like, "Are you going to be able to finish all that?" I'm like, "Leave me alone. I got it." Where I love storytelling. So I lived here from age 5 to 10. I lived in Canada. Then from age 10 till I was 21, I lived in Grenada. And what was beautiful then is that reintroduced me to the tradition of oral storytelling. And also seeing how we could stretch our imaginations even further. Like growing up there in a very rural community. Yes, we were one of the few homes that had video game consoles. We were one of the few that had it. But we did so much outside play and all of that too, like really stretches your imagination and so on. So I love storytelling and art, because art is also another form of storytelling. Is what is the artist trying to convey through this? What moment in time, even if the time is in their imagination, are they trying to capture as well? So I think a couple years ago I realized, like, I don't actually want to be a creative. I don't really want to be a creator in that way. But I want to see, how can I facilitate, how can I support artists and other creators in doing their work. So that's what keeps me going, is just like, as long as the art is being created, that's my fuel. Um, and also I'm just a very stubborn woman. I'm very stubborn, very headstrong. And so on. So I think like those are the things that really keep me going. And I think I also subscribe to a higher calling. I think that my purpose here on earth is to be a, not necessarily to be a guide, and I'm kind of lost on the language right now, but to shepherd people to their calling and to their potential as well.
It's beautiful to be able to identify that and, walk in that purpose. So we really appreciate that. I want to shift gears a little bit and discuss some of the challenges or barriers you face in your work, and what are you and your team doing to overcome them?
Yeah. Um, so like the many challenges in doing this work. So we're a really small team, really tiny staff. When I say tiny, it's like it's 5 of us. It's also going to go down a bit soon. So we're a really small staff. We are, but we have a huge mandate. We have big dreams. In terms of nonprofits, and I know for a lot of not-for-profits right now, is the lack of, let me not say lack of, limited support for operational development and operational sustainability of our organizations. All the funding that we do receive, they are project-based, where usually we could only set aside maybe about 15% of that to go towards overhead. There are maybe like one or two funders who allow for 25% to go towards that. But the majority are 15% or lower. Some, it's only 7.5% that you could put towards that. That doesn't really allow an organization to build sustainably. Also thinking about then that also only allows us to hire contract staff. So we end up losing out on that continuity and actually building on programming year after year. Instead, we only have like a short bit of time that we could engage someone for the work. That means that a lot of the program development stays with me on top of all of the other things within my portfolio that I have to cover. So it becomes quite a lot for our organizations to really grow, to strengthen ourselves operationally, but also to be able to pay our staffs a living wage, which is something that is in line with our organizational values. If we say that we value the people who we work with, the people within our community, then we really want to ensure they could meet their basic needs and beyond that. It also takes away the opportunity for us to pay for benefits for staff as well. And that affects staff recruitment and retention within the organization. With the lack of operational funding too, we're unable to really build strong financial systems for our organizations. So it's what it takes away from us. So it's great to see all of the great announcement that we could have, but that mainly being project-based funding, it's sorely it's very limiting to the organization as well. So that's one of the big ones. And I know like so many times when we talk to funders, a lot of funders are like, well, no, we don't do that. And then one of the things that we look at too is the funders will say, okay, well, we only do for the project. But there's so much work that takes place prior to the project being launched. There are programs that we have that took a year and a half of development before it became public. We're not compensated for that time or that labor either. So that's one of the big challenges that we face. Also, what I've seen in the past 2 years is a deprioritization of our community's needs. And we see that publicly in terms of how many DEI departments are being slashed, how many heads of DEI are being let go at institutions. We also see it now in smaller ways in terms of sponsorships too. Sponsors are moving on to different issues, but also sponsors are facing financial challenges of their own. So the generosity decreases as well, or it shifts to a different priority. So just some of the things that we're seeing. We've also experienced, as always, rising racism. And that comes from sometimes we get responses to our newsletter, people accusing us of being racist, of creating programs that are very exclusive, and then we take the time in terms of explaining why we need to create these programs and why our organization exists as well. We're also, and there's some other things that I've noticed in the past few months too. I'm really trying to see how to navigate those conversations as well. So I'll stay away from that one for now. But so I'm
Play
trying to
it safe. But no, you
think of
touched
a
on
new
some
one.
real heavy ones for sure that, I think we all say we've witnessed at some point or the other. So I'm glad you highlighted some of those.
Yeah.
You talked about sometimes working on things for a year or more and not being able to, apply funding to that because it's specific to the project. Do you have a key set of priorities that you're working on now, that you're either planning towards to get funded or they're definitely on the schedule now that you'd like to highlight?
I do. um, I have to take off my glasses. Does weird things to me. I also can't see that well anymore.
It
Um,
happens.
so some of the things that we really want to focus on this year is providing access to mental health and legal resources for our community. And we've been thinking about this for a couple years now, that we would love to have a like a drop-in legal clinic that could maybe just do like really short, quick consultation or advice for people who are needing that, but also to do some workshops. We partnered with Edwards Creative Law a couple of years ago and did a couple seminars. We also did some with Black Film Legal, and also CARFAC and ALAS. So that's the Artist Legal. Sorry, I won't get it right. So for ALAS, so that's what we've worked with, to provide some of those. Where we see that there's greater need for that now, with people being approached for work, not truly understanding legal language and understand like how they could retain their rights in their work as well. So we're looking at that. And in terms of mental health, we've really been on the front line of really recognizing how racism and discrimination within the film and TV sector affects people's ability to show up for work, and also to navigate these very racist spaces as well. So we've been thinking about a while in terms of getting some support so we could provide some mental health resources, where it could be maybe some toolkits, maybe deliver some workshops, some seminars, but also to have some drop-in sessions. We used to do a virtual series. We did this in 2020 and 2021 called Self-Care Sundays. So we could have like really drop-in type session, but sometimes very curated sessions, so people could talk about the impact, the true impact of working in this industry and some of the challenges that they're facing. So we ran that for a while. It was really great, but we'd love to bring that back. We see that there's a great need for that across our industry. So that's really one place that we really want to put some support behind. Then we also want to continue working with partners, with other industry stakeholders on improving workplace conditions for Black and other racialized people within the screen sector, to ensure that people have safe places to work and to grow their skills and their talents as well. And what we mean by psychological and cultural safety within the workplace in Canada. So we've done a few of those already. We consult with a few production companies, with broadcasters as well, to see how we could support the development of their policies and practices to ensure that people are supported within the workplace. And then one thing that we did this year, that we announced last year, we announced some new programs in the past year. One that I'm so excited for, it's huge. It's called Elevate. It's a business development incubator that we're doing in collaboration with the National Screen Institute, sponsored by Paramount Plus, the Canada Media Fund, Ontario Creates, Telefilm Canada, and we do have some additional partners as well on that. And that one we're selecting a few production companies, BIPOC-owned production companies from across Canada, providing them with a with a grant between $20,000 to $50,000 each. And also we're partnering with the Toronto Metropolitan University to deliver a 4-module business development program for them. And so I'm very excited by that because I really think that for our community to really thrive over the next few years with the changes that are going to be taking place within our industry, we have to invest in our businesses and our entrepreneurs to ensure that they can compete not only locally but also internationally too. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited for this year. There's some other programs that we've launched as well. We're about to publicly announce soon the participants in our Rising Voices Canada program. That's a feature film script development program for five filmmakers who are working on their first feature film. So we partner with Hillman Grad Productions in the US, and this program is sponsored by Indeed. So very excited for that, and we have TIFF is involved in that program. So looking forward to that. And that's because we really want to ensure that people could get that first feature project done and for it to be really strong, because that will help set the stage for the other opportunities that they will get.
Absolutely. So how do you feel about the future of impact investing and DEI?
And I think it's more so in terms of how it exists within corporate capitalist spaces. And it's been very troubling to me. Usually DEI is pushed into an HR department or to a separate department that is underfunded, under-resourced. I sense sometimes in my conversation with people not a true understanding of what it means, because for me, I think beyond that, I'm thinking about justice and liberation instead. And some of the questions I've asked is, what does it mean to be free as a filmmaker? What does it mean to be free as an artist, as an entrepreneur in this sector? What does that look like for you? And that's where I would like to see the conversation. I think diversity, it's great in terms of where do we see? What do we see? You know, do we see the representation? Inclusion in terms of, and inclusion still has a power dynamic to it, because that means that there are people with the power to include and exclude others within that. So I'm very troubled by that as well. And then seeing equity, I think is closer to what I would love to see for industry in terms of how are we equitably distributing resources, power, and so on within this industry, within our world as well. And I think that's a space where we could work out more nuance on it. You know, like there's a spectrum of privilege. And I think we need more acknowledgement of that. Where yes, I'm a Black woman, but I'm also a Black woman living in Toronto. You know, I'm also a Black woman. I'm a single mother. I am, you know, and just I think we have to think about it in a much more intersectional way. And without that nuance, I think we're just gonna be having the same conversations over and over again. I want to see us investing more in systems change, but I know system change is very uncomfortable because it means that some people are going to lose the power that they hold right now, the power and the privilege they hold. And a lot of people don't want to gamble that. So, and also the uncomfortable conversations that come out of it as well. So I think that we are in space where we haven't even started to have the real conversations. I mean, that's what my thoughts are on DEI right now is we've just been working at the surface level with it. We haven't dug down deep in that work yet. And until we do, we'll be in the same spot. Um, and then in terms of how I feel in general, it goes, I keep saying like I'm usually a pessimist. But there are days where I could be very optimistic about what this industry could be. And I think imagination is one of our biggest assets. And imagination, yes, in a way, in terms of create, and I'm thinking about in terms of still being able to envision a world that is just, that's free, and so on. So I try to tap into that to keep me going, but it's really hard. I think there are a lot of opportunities presented for us, not only within the borders of Canada, but outside of it as well, in terms of what is the content that we are exporting, the content and the talent that we're exporting here. I think what's really great for us as Black and other racialized people is that our communities, our audiences exist way beyond the borders of Canada. And that's why I think that we could really tap into those international opportunities that will open up for us. That we don't just have to think. I think for a long time, when we would go pitch at a broadcaster, they would ask us, okay, but how will this show, this movie, how will it relate to this random white couple in the middle of the country? And with the opening of the borders, because of streamers, because of international distribution, we don't have to just think about that group of people. We could think beyond it in terms of maybe our audience is in West Africa, maybe our audience is in Australia. Our diasporas are vast. Always, I know people always joke that you could go anywhere and you could find a Nigerian or a Jamaican. Go anywhere in the world, and also go anywhere and you'll find someone who is South Asian, who is East Asian, we're all over. So our stories are global. So I want us to hold on to that thing that we don't have to limit ourselves to these borders.
Absolutely. It's so true, like you said, opening up the borders and looking beyond just here in Canada, because we exist out there, right? And people want that for sure. So, what would be your ultimate goal? What would success look like for you and your colleagues?
It's funny because when I was interviewed back in 2020 and asked this question, my ultimate goal is um that our mission is no longer relevant.
Hmm.
Like that was it for me. Um and I think in some way, yes, I would just really love for us to exist as a space to incubate ideas and talent and to support each other. That if that's what we could exist as, I would be so happy. If we didn't also have to think about how do we fight against a system that was designed for us not to thrive. If we didn't also have to do all of the education as well to educate others about how to treat us and how to treat us as bare minimum as human beings. If we didn't have to do that work, if if we didn't have to walk on eggshells around certain conversations and so on, that for me is freedom.
Absolutely. I feel like when I traveled to South Africa and you saw how comfortable they were talking about race, it was so eye-opening for me. I was just like, I'm not sure why, but we just can't, I don't know, certain communities are just uncomfortable just mentioning race.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, not having to walk on eggshells and being able to speak openly and freely, absolutely. That
And
we can agree on that.
yeah, and to be able to tell stories that fully embraces the complexities of who we are. Like we don't have to tell stories only through the lens of whiteness, which that's where I think like the quote unquote like trauma stories are built into that. It's not
Mm.
for our gaze.
Mhm.
It's to for me, it's an attempt to justify
Mhm.
why we exist and why we should have the right to exist. I want us to move beyond that in terms of we exist, period. We're here. That should be enough, you know? And I was on another panel I was telling them like when I was little, I wrote stories. I still have them. I still have a bunch of my stories. But I wrote a story once about Janet Jackson being abducted by aliens on tour, you know, and the leader of the aliens is the protagonist's grandmother who steals her away and takes her off to space. And so I'm like, give us a space to tell those stories, you
You
know?
really are a storyteller. You've been at this for a while.
I'm like, give us that, you know, and oh, like we we see that's a beauty, you know, of who we are. One of my favorite series growing up was was a Trinidad-based soap opera called Westwood Park, and like it was so good. It was so good. Oh my God.
I'll
Um,
have to look it up on the
it was
box.
drama, it's everything, but it was us. You
Mhm.
know, us how we just got to exist. We just got to exist in a space that is ours without the weight of white supremacy upon us either, you know. So I I want to see more of that, you know. I want to like one of my favorite movies last year was Bottoms, you know, starring Ayo. And I'm like, that was so much fun to watch, you know, to watch like a teen movie, you know, where one of the leads, it's a young Black woman as one of the leads, talking about like the awkwardness of being in high school. And she's also queer. And it's like that's what I want to see more of. And it wasn't centered on like her Blackness in that. I'm not saying that I want us to erase that part of who we are. It is part of our essence, but that we are much more. And I think that's where I actually want to see us. Um, yeah, I hope that that's something we get to do in my lifetime.
Absolutely. I love the picture that you painted for us. You can see it clearly. I think a lot of people would want to strive for that. So I'm glad you touched on those things. I think your industry specifically, the sector is sort of sometimes can go unnoticed, especially here in Canada. You know, it is sort of a small industry here, but I'm glad you highlighted some of that. Do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our community?
I want us to tell our stories boldly. Because I remember um boldly and with passion and authenticity. And to know that we belong in every space that we are in. We belong there.
Mhm.
It's not an if, it is that if we're there, we belong there, you know. And and to take that space up boldly, you know, try not to shrink too much in it. If you do, find a corner or a safe space and have your moment and then get back in. You're like, yes, I'm ready to go again. The next thing I will say is for us to give ourselves grace. And yes, ourselves as individuals, but also those who are we are in community with. That for us to lead more in kindness and in understanding as well. Um, I would also say in terms of for us to stop seeing ourselves as the enemy. Um, there is a lot of trauma, a lot of traumas that we deal with. Um, and sometimes trauma, sometimes pain makes us lash out at the people who are in closest proximity to us, who are in arm's reach. And where the real source of it is outside, is outside of that, and it's outside of that radius. And we really need to see that those who are in close proximity with us will most likely be able to help us through that, you know, as opposed to being um in being an antagonizer in that as well. So I would say that, and I also encourage for us to extend that grace across generations too, to remember what it was like when we were young and coming up, to remember that, to see like, you know what, yes, I know I'm looking at these teenagers on the bus and I'm like, no. But I also remember like I was a teenager on the bus too at some point in time, and for us to just take that moment, have a laugh on our own and then continue, but also seeing how can I then guide that person? How can I build a relationship with them so then we could all get where we need to go faster and safer and with more love? And that's what I think that really like for us to see. And I would say too that I think competition is a very natural thing. I think it's very natural, especially we're living in a capitalist, white supremacist society, that competition will always be a thing here. But there's a way for us to do that in a way that we are not destroying each other.
Absolutely.
And where we could find, if we lean more into collaboration, into solidarity, that will serve us much better. So that's what I would like to leave with anybody. And I know before I've been called naive for this. But you know what, I'm good with that naivety. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. If that's the worst that could be said, I'm okay.
And sometimes it's a trait that's necessary, right? Because it's those who are naive and don't stop that have really paved the way and made difference. Like you don't become a legend till afterwards, but like the whole time you believed it was so, it was so, but you're waiting for people to catch up. So
I just think that this is not how we need to be with each other, in
yeah,
terms of like we can we can compete. For me, I would see a grant and I would share it with colleagues. I would be like, I want one of us to get this. If two of us get this, even better.
I'm better.
If three of
Yeah.
us get this, yes,
Yeah.
that's the best case scenario.
Well, let's
Well,
go.
let's all go for it.
Hmm.
And let's figure out like what are our asks and what do we want to get out of this, that if we find those moments it'll be better. So yes, we still have to compete in this space because grant funding is limited,
Hmm.
and there are some practices by funders that perpetuate this type of tribalism as well. However, we can still find a way to work the system. If there's a job, send it to all your friends who qualify. Point is, we want to see one of us in that role. So if the
Help us
goal
get in the room.
Yes,
Absolutely.
if that is the goal, if that's what we're like, this is what we want collectively, then why should it matter who is the person or who is the organization or institution that gets into that space? I want us to be there. And then once we're there, then we pull the others up with us.
Absolutely. Well, I think it could have been better said. I really appreciate all your sentiments that you shared. We really appreciate your leadership, the work that you're doing, and once again, taking the time to be with us today with this interview. So, how can people find you if they wanted to follow up and potentially partner or work with you?
Yeah, so people could find us on our website at BIPOC We're also very active on Instagram, or they could email us at hello@BIPOCTVandfilm.com.
That's great. So once again, Kadon, thank you so much for your phenomenal leadership and taking the time out for this interview. We just want to close the way we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as acknowledging our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We want to acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build and do this collective work together for our liberation and sovereignty. So again, thank you so much, Kadon, and thank you to our viewers and listeners.